Welcome back to the Last Battalion. Today we're going to have a look at the Perry Miniatures plastic French Infantry, which I've used a large number of for my current project. And I'm going to roughly show you how I take it from its original plastic form to completed, painted and varnished. In an effort to keep the video from running over time, I won't go into enormous detail about how I actually paint the miniature, but I'll show you some of the steps that I take to build it, some of the tools that I've used, and the process I go through in priming it, mounting it, and basically making it a bit easier to maneuver the miniature during the process of painting it. So to begin with, here we have one of the sprues from the Battalion box set. And very nice, it is 2. You get 5 figures on that with a selection of arms, heads, and the various equipment and haversacks that they have. And then for removing the pieces from the sprue, I use an ordinary Stanley knife almost exclusively, just to carefully clip it off there at the arm joints and the base in this case, and I recommend being a little bit careful you don't damage any delicate parts as you do so. This is one of the bodies when it's been removed from the sprue. As you can see, where it's been cut off, it's got the little bits of additional plastic that will need scraping off with a knife, and up and down the inside and outside of the trousers, gaiters, shoes, along the backs of the shoulders, up the sides of the collar as well, there are a series of mould lines, or flash if you prefer, all of which need carefully scraping off and removing in order to prepare the model surface for priming. Then with another piece, so this is the backpack that I've removed, just an example. You'll see it's got the little plastic lugs there from being removed from the sprue, and then a line of the moulding running all the way across the top of it, particularly irritating actually to remove it from the straps on top. And all of those will need scraping off as well prior to constructing the miniature. To achieve that, I have a couple of additional tools. So one is this scraper, as I like to refer to it. I think I might have got from Hobbycraft originally. It's good for cleaning up the large flat areas of mould lines where you're not too worried about accidentally scrubbing off any of the details. And then I also use a very sharp craft knife to do the more delicate work, particularly around details you don't want to remove, where in this case you might not want to accidentally slice the collar off, and just get into all the folds of the sculpt without damaging the actual miniature. So this is the assembled miniature. I've taken the liberty of putting it together with some arms and selecting a head from the sprue, and so it's now all finished and ready to be primed. For my priming purposes, I use these popsicle sticks that you can get fairly cheaply, and I like to mount them in rows, as seen here. In this case, they've actually got heads from the chasseurs sprue because they're going to be carabiniers for a light infantry unit. But this is just a straightforward black primer that I've put all over them, and the stick helps me maneuver them during that process and prevents me from touching them accidentally. Once I've done that, in this next example, these are miniatures that are going to be Italians, and as such, they've had an additional light grey primer applied. This is a Tamiya primer, I think. Other brands are available. And I'll probably do it with the French as well, just to provide a slightly lighter primer coat for then painting white uniforms, which are sort of notoriously difficult to achieve a pleasing white coverage. It's even more difficult to do it on a black primer undercoat. So that's my 2-stage priming process. It's only a light dusting of the grey colour. You don't want to overdo it because you might obscure some of the details if you put too much primer on. And here's some of the skirmishers from the box set. In this case, they've been primed directly on the base that they will ultimately end up being finished upon. And that's my whole priming procedure. But the fun with popsicle sticks doesn't stop there, because what I do after that is snap them in half and then individually mount a strip of, say, 6 that I'm painting at a time. As you can see here, this is a lot easier to use when you're then painting the details on individual miniatures to get round and in between them. If they were all mounted in a row, it makes it much more difficult, I find. And also, popsicle sticks are a much cheaper alternative to the specifically made hobby handles for painting miniatures with. The only slight exception is that I do block in some of the base colours whilst they're all mounted in multiples. But yeah, I think this is a pretty good solution to being able to paint them without touching them and rubbing the paint off. And then ultimately, hopefully, they should end up looking like this. And this is the finished version after they've been painted, details added, and then I've given them a matte varnish, which is what I prefer to use. I've only reattached them to a popsicle stick for the ability to show you them with greater ease on camera. I'll just line them up next to what they look like in the stage of the process before that. And here's a quick overview of all those steps put together that I take them through. As I say, I haven't gone into the painting in great detail. That's a whole nother video. So starting with the assembled plastic miniature, moving on to a straightforward prime black attached in multiples to a single stick. And then as an option, an additional primer colour here just to make it slightly easier to paint lighter colours. Then individually mounting them to do the majority of the painting, and finishing them off with a bit of a matte varnish, ready to be based in their 6s, 4s, or whatever it is I've chosen to mount them as for my preferred rule set. In the near future, these miniatures I'm painting at the moment will probably feature in a showcase of the whole 7th Italian Line Regiment when I've finished all 3 battalions. As an additional insight, I thought I'd also show you how I mount flags. In this case, to begin with, this is a metal Perry miniature, and I have only on this occasion left the metal flagpole that came with the pack in place. It's a much softer metal, and I'll probably regret that decision in the future, and features one of the beautiful GMB flags. To replace the flagpole, I use one of these, which is a 2mm thick steel spear that I think I got from North Star Miniatures, and I just clip that down to size, and then it's a straightforward swap with the existing flagpole. But when it comes to plastic miniatures, I need this, which is a pin vise with a 2mm drill bit. So here, use an example of a finished base. So the flag bearer here is a plastic miniature, and it comes moulded with the flagpole. So I've had to snip that off above and below the hands, and then use the drill bit to very, very carefully drill through the hands, as indicated here, and then slot the flagpole, when it's been clipped to size, through that gap carefully. If you choose to do this, just take your time, but the results are well worth it for a more robust flagpole for tabletop use. And that's it for my overview of how I take the plastic miniature from its original form to its completed painted and varnished. Finished these Italians that I'm working on, and I come to base them all. I will do a video covering my basing method. And if there's anything else you're interested in that you've seen from my collection and you might like to know more, and perhaps see a similar kind of short guide how-to, then please let me know in the comments below. But until then, happy hobbying, and I'll see you in the next video.